Princess Alara stood on the balcony of the great palace, looking out at the bright city below. The Zinthri capital was full of tall, shining buildings, glowing lights, and flying ships. It was a city of power and beauty. But today her heart was full of worry. Alara was the daughter of the Emperor of Zinther. It's a proud and strong alien race known for their advanced technology and strict traditions. She was the future leader of her people, yet she was about to marry a man very different from anyone in her world. His name was Jacob. He was from Earth, a small blue planet far away. To the Zinthri, humans were simple. They were not as smart or powerful. Many people in the court did not believe Jacob was a good match for their princess, but Alara did not care. Jacob was kind and honest. He was brave and strong in ways no one expected. Alara had met him when she visited Earth secretly. They talked for hours. He did not care that she was a princess from another world. He treated her like an equal. That made her feel special. Today was their wedding day. The palace was full of guests wearing bright clothes and sparkling jewels. The Zinthri nobles whispered to each other, watching Jacob closely. Many doubted he was worthy of their princess. Inside the grand hall, Jacob stood nervously in his simple suit. He looked small next to the tall Zinthri nobles in their shining armor, but his eyes were steady and calm. He knew this day was important not just for him and Alara, but for the future of both their worlds. When Alara entered the hall, everyone fell silent. She wore a long white dress that shimmered like the stars. Her silver hair was braided with tiny blue gems that glowed softly. She smiled at Jacob, and he smiled back. For a moment, nothing else mattered. The ceremony began with ancient songs sung by the royal choir. The emperor gave a speech warning everyone about the dangers of trusting humans. "We must be careful," he said. "The future of Zinther depends on strength and wisdom." Alara felt a pang of sadness but also determination. She took Jacob's Zetalaus hand and looked into his eyes. "I believe in him," she said quietly. The priest placed a glowing ring on Jacob's finger. It was made of a rare Zinthri metal, symbolizing their bond. Jacob looked at the ring and then at Alara. "I promise to protect you," he said. The crowd clapped, but some still looked doubtful. To them, Jacob was a simple man who did not belong in their world. After the ceremony, the guests moved to the palace gardens for the feast. Strange alien foods were served alongside earth dishes that Jacob had asked for. Alara laughed as Jacob tried the spicy Zinthri fruit and nearly choked. Some nobles tried to talk to Jacob, but he only smiled politely and answered carefully. He knew he had to earn their respect, but he was not afraid. As the sun set, Alara and Jacob slipped away to a quiet room in the palace. The stars shone outside the window. "Now, do you really think I can be a good princess for your people?" she asked softly. Jacob took her hand and squeezed it. "You are already a great leader," he said, "and together we will face whatever comes next." Alara felt hope fill her heart. She knew their journey would be hard, but she believed in Jacob and in their future. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the palace, lighting the large, polished floors. Jacob stood in the grand hallway, trying to learn the strange customs of the Zinthri court. The palace was full of mirrors, holograms, and machines that buzzed softly. Everything was new and confusing. Alara watched him from a distance, smiling quietly. She knew it was not easy for him. He was far from Earth, from the simple life he once knew. But she believed in him. Jacob tried to listen carefully as the royal advisors spoke in their fast, sharp language. They talked about politics, alliances, and dangers. Jacob felt like a fish out of water. He was not used to this world of secrets and power games that afternoon. Alara took Jacob to the training grounds outside the palace. Their warriors practiced with strange weapons and fought in the air using jetpacks. The Zinthri were strong and fast, their movements sharp and precise. Jacob watched, amazed. He felt small among these powerful aliens. But Alara's voice was steady when she said, "You must learn to protect yourself here." Jacob nodded. "I want to learn," he said. "Not just for me, but for you." Days passed and Jacob tried his best to adapt. He studied the language and customs. He practiced fighting with simple tools. Though his body was strong, he knew he was not ready for Zinthri battle. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the palace, dark plans began to form. A secret group of nobles, unhappy with the marriage, whispered in hidden rooms. They believed Jacob was a threat to their power. "He is just a human," one said bitterly. "He cannot lead us." Another replied, "If the princess trusts him, then we must stop him before it is too late." These conspirators sent spies to watch Jacob and Alara. They waited for a chance to strike. One evening, as the palace quieted, Jacob and Alara sat in the garden under the stars. The cool air smelled of flowers and strange spices. Alara looked worried. "Do you feel it?" she asked. "The court is not happy. They watch us closely." Jacob held her hand. "I have noticed," he said, "but I will not let them harm you." Alara smiled faintly. "You are brave. But this is more than bravery. It is wisdom that we need." Jacob nodded. "I will learn." Days later, Jacob found himself alone in a quiet hallway when a strange message appeared on a small screen. It was a warning. "Danger comes soon. Trust no one." Jacob's heart raced. Who could have sent this? Was it a friend or an enemy? I told Alara, and she grew more serious. "We must be careful," she said. "This palace hides many secrets." As the days turned to weeks, the tension in the palace grew. Jacob noticed glances that stopped when he looked, whispers that ended when he entered rooms. But the hardest part was seeing the doubt in Alara's own people. He looked at her with cold eyes, questioning her choice. One night, as Jacob walked through the palace, he heard voices behind a door. He hid and listened. "They will never accept a human as their leader," said one noble. "We must take action." He had to protect Alara and the future they dreamed of. He decided to visit the ancient armory, a place few dared to enter. It was said to hold weapons of the old wars, powerful and dangerous. When he stepped inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. Walls were lined with swords, shields, and strange machines. His eyes fell on a sword with a shining blade. Unlike anything he had seen, Jacob reached out and touched the hilt. Memories flooded back, training, battles, secrets he had buried deep inside. He knew then that his life was more than the quiet man Alara thought he was. He was a warrior once, and the time to fight was coming. Back in the palace, Alara studied. The stars from her balcony, she thought about the future, the dangers and hopes. She believed in Jacob. But she did not yet know the full truth. The shadows around them were growing darker. The court was preparing for a battle not just of swords, but of power and trust. And when the time came, Jacob would have to draw his sword. The day began like any other in the great palace of Zinthar. But deep inside, a storm was about to break. Jacob stood quietly in his chamber, staring at the sword he had found in the ancient armory. Its blade shimmered with a strange light, and its handle felt familiar in his hands, as if it belonged to him. But this was not just any sword. It was a symbol of power, history, and danger. He remembered the old stories from Earth legends of warriors who fought not just for themselves, but for their people's freedom. Jacob knew that those stories were more than myths. They were part of his own past, a past he had hidden from Alara and the Sci-Fi. Suddenly, the palace alarm sounded a deep, echoing wail that filled the halls. Red lights flashed everywhere. The guests and nobles looked confused and frightened. Jacob's heart quickened. He dropped the sword and ran to find Alara. In the great hall, chaos had broken out. A group of masked attackers stormed the palace, moving fast and deadly. They were not just thieves. They were soldiers trained to kill. The Zinthri guards fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and surprised. Alara stood in the middle of the hall, her silver hair glowing under the red lights. She looked frightened but strong. Jacob reached her side just as a masked figure lunged toward the princess with a deadly blade. Without thinking, Jacob grabbed the sword he had left on the floor. Time seemed to slow as he raised the sword. The blade sang through the air, catching the light as Jacob moved with speed and skill that shocked everyone watching. He struck down the attacker in one smooth motion, blocking another with ease. The The sword seemed to guide his hand, moving like a part of him. The crowd gasped. Who was this man who fought like a legend? Jacob did not stop. He fought with calm and precision, protecting Alara with every step. The attackers fell back, their plan broken by the sudden power of the human with the shining sword. When the last attacker was defeated, silence filled the hall. All eyes were on Jacob. Alara stepped forward, her voice strong. This man is my husband. He is more than what you see. The emperor, her father, looked at Jacob with new eyes filled with surprise and respect. Jacob breathed heavily, but stood tall. I am here to protect the princess and this empire, he said firmly. No one will harm her while I am here. Whispers spread through the crowd. The nobles who had doubted Jacob before now wondered if they had been wrong. Later that evening, in a quiet room, Alara and Jacob talked alone. Why didn't you tell me you could fight like that? Alara asked softly. Jacob looked down at the sword. Because I wanted you to see me as I am now, not my past, he said. But now, I see that my past is part of who I am, and I will use it to protect you and your people. Alara smiled, her eyes shining. I believed in you before. Now I trust you completely. Danger was not over. The attackers were only the beginning. Jacob's sword had revealed a hidden war one that threatened to destroy everything they loved. Together, they would have to face the coming storm. The palace was quieter than usual after the attack. Guards stood on every corner, watching carefully. The nobles whispered in small groups, their eyes full of suspicion and fear. The marriage of Princess Alara to Jacob, the human, had shaken the very foundation of the Zinthri Empire. Jacob sat with Alara in her private chambers. The walls were covered with glowing maps of the galaxy, showing stars, planets, and trade routes. Alara traced a path on one of the maps with her finger. This war is bigger than we thought, she said softly. The attackers were just a small part of a larger plan. Jacob nodded. I sensed that too. There's a shadow behind the throne. A secret enemy moving in silence. Alara looked at him with tired eyes. Do you trust the council? Jacob shook his head. Not all of them are loyal, but others may want to see us fall. The two sat quietly, feeling the weight of their responsibility. Suddenly, the door opened, and Commander Varn, the captain of the palace guards, entered. He was a tall, stern Zinthri, with silver armor that gleamed even in the dim light. Princess. Jacob, he said. We have uncovered a hidden network of spies and traitors inside the city. They are planning to strike again soon. Alara's eyes narrowed. How deep does this go? Varn hesitated. Deeper than we feared. Nobles are involved. They want to use the unrest to seize power. Jacob clenched his fists. We need to act fast. We cannot wait for the enemy to attack again. Alara stood up. Then we must find our allies and prepare for war. Jacob felt a sudden surge of energy. The sword by his side was no longer just a weapon. It was a symbol of hope. Over the next days, Jacob and Alara worked together to uncover the traitors. They met secretly with trusted advisors and soldiers. Jacob trained with the palace guards, teaching them tactics from Earth. The Zinthri soldiers were skilled, but Jacob's knowledge of ground combat added new strength. In the evenings, Alara and Jacob talked long into the night, fears and dreams for their future. One night, as they watched the stars from the palace roof, Alara said, I never imagined I would find such a partner in you, Jacob. You are more than I dreamed. Jacob smiled. Or stronger than any ruler I have ever known. But danger was closing in. One evening, as Jacob returned from a meeting with a trusted noble, he noticed strange figures moving in the shadows. They followed him through the dark streets of the city. Jacob's heart raced. He knew this was a trap. Moved quickly, weaving through narrow alleys. Suddenly, the attackers jumped out, blocking his path. Jacob drew his sword, its blade shining in the moonlight. The fight was fast and fierce. Jacob's skill was unmatched. He blocked attacks disarmed enemies and struck with power. When the last attacker fell, Jacob stood alone in the silent street, breathing hard. He knew this was just the beginning. Back at the palace, Alara waited anxiously. When Jacob returned, She embraced him tightly. "We will win this," she said firmly. Jacob nodded. For us, for Zinther, for Earth, the final battle came sooner than they expected. The traitors launched an attack on the palace. Their ships flew low, firing powerful energy weapons. The city shook as explosions lit the night sky. Alara stood on the palace walls, directing the defense. Jacob fought alongside the guards, his sword cutting through enemy forces. The battle was brutal and long. But Jacob's courage and Alara's leadership inspired the defenders. As the enemy retreated, the palace cheered. Now, after the battle, the emperor approached Jacob. "You have proven yourself," he said. "It's not just as a warrior, but as a leader." Jacob bowed. "I fight for the princess and for peace between our worlds." Alara smiled proudly. "Together, we are stronger." The hidden war was not over, but for the first time, hope shone brightly. The sun rose over the Zinthri capital, casting golden light across the palace and city. After the fierce battle and the storm of conspiracies, a new day had come, a day filled with hope and promise. Princess Alara stood on the highest balcony, watching the city below bustle with life. The people were no longer fearful but hopeful. The news of the defeat of the traitors had spread quickly, and the empire was slowly healing. Jacob stood beside her, calm but alert. His sword, now polished and shining, hung at his side. It was no longer just a weapon, but a symbol of the trust and unity between two very different worlds. Alara turned to him, her eyes bright. "We have come far, Jacob. From that quiet man I met on Earth to the warrior who saved my people, you have changed everything." Jacob smiled softly. "I never wanted to be a hero, but I will fight for you and for this empire as long as I live." Hi there. Hands found each other's, a simple touch full of meaning. They were no longer just a princess and a stranger. They were partners, equals. In the great hall, a meeting was held with the emperor, the council, and the people's leaders. The emperor spoke with a strong voice. "The attack on our palace was an attack on our future," he said. "But thanks to Jacob's courage and the strength of our people, we stand united." Today marks the beginning of a new era. Who had once doubted Jacob now looked at him with respect. Some even came forward to support the alliance between humans and Censure. Jacob addressed the gathering, his voice steady. "This victory is not mine alone. It belongs to everyone who believed in peace and cooperation. Together, we will build a stronger galaxy." The crowd cheered and Alara smiled proudly. But rebuilding trust was not easy. Some old wounds still remained. There were those who resisted change, who feared the humans and their different ways. Jacob and Alara worked tirelessly to bridge the gaps. They visited towns and planets, speaking to the people, listening to their fears, and sharing their vision of unity. Slowly, walls of distrust began to fall. One evening, as the stars twinkled above, Jacob and Alara walked through the palace gardens. The air was cool, filled with the scent of alien flowers. Alara stopped and looked at Jacob. "Do you ever miss Earth?" Jacob nodded. "Sometimes, but I have found a new home here with you." She smiled and took his hand. "And I have found strength I never knew I had." They paused, looking at the stars that connected their worlds. Months passed and their bond grew stronger. They ruled together, guiding the Zinthri toward a future where humans and aliens worked side by side. Jacob's sword, once hidden in the ancient armory, became a symbol of hope and courage. It was placed in the palace museum, a reminder of the day a simple man showed the strength of a true warrior. One day, as Jacob trained young soldiers, Alara watched from the balcony. She saw not just a man with a sword, but a leader who inspired others to be brave and true. Their story was no longer about a princess marrying a simple man. It was about two hearts, two worlds, and a future built on trust and courage. And so, under the twin moons of Zinther, the princess and her husband stood, side by side, ready to face whatever the stars had in store, because together they were unstoppable.